Very good. We are going to be in Psalms here this morning. As I was preparing for this week and as the news was getting crazier and crazier, we wanted to be able to do something a little different here for this afternoon service. And certainly, as was that Friday when the president declared today a national day of prayer, wanted to be able to spend some time this afternoon in prayer as well. Of our going to be our routine from this point forward for at least a while now. And when it became clear that as other churches were canceling and we're being told to restrict our time together and all of that, I thought, we should just go down to one service, but I really wanted to go over what we were going to do in the afternoon. And technically, the afternoon service today was going to be part 2 of the morning message of the series, which is ironically part 3 of going through the Gospels of our response to fear. And what a perfect time frame for all of this, that we're going through a multi-week kind of a sub-series through the Gospels in regards to responding to fear. And then as well, we're slowly concluding on Wednesday nights the reality of trusting God. And as we are now hit with this virus, and I think it gives us the opportunity to truly live out what we know to be true from the Word of God. Mm-hmm. And again, I know that there are a lot who are stressing out, losing their minds, literally losing their minds. I was talking to somebody this last week who was actually having an anxiety attack over this. And honestly, from my vantage, when I take my head, I think this is just crazy. This is nonsense. This is insanity. And I'm not afraid to say that. I think this is insanity. But there are people who cannot handle this. They literally are stressing out and anxious and they cannot stop sweating. Their heart rate is high and cannot sleep at night because of the what ifs and what's going to happen and what are the details from this point forward. A lot of times, and I've said this many times, I think there's a lot of times that we need to just simply turn off our televisions and our radios and stop going on Facebook and any other social media. And frankly, if that would take place in our nation, I think the panic would be over. That's right. I think that all of those sources are just fueling more of the panic. And it's easy to see why. It's easy to see what the source is. But what I want to encourage us here this morning is to remind us in a very simple way of truth that we know, a very simple illustration, story, narrative that we know. This verse that we're going to be looking at here in Psalms is going to be a verse, if you know Mr. E, you're going to be singing along with me here this morning. But then my expectation for the rest of the morning, I want to quickly review some of this again. This was going to be the afternoon service. We're now having it this morning because I want to go over this. And so we're going to be going over a kind of an afternoon style devotion. And then I want to go over some details just so that we're all on the same page of what's going to happen from this point forward. And then I do believe that we as a church need to spend some time in prayer, not out of fear. I hope that we are not responding in fear. But again, just a reminder of the mission field, a reminder that there are people that literally are suffering and they don't even have the virus. There are those as well that have the virus that may or may not be suffering as well. But certainly, if the church is not going to be the ones that are going to the Lord in prayer, who will? And so we want to close out today with some time together, just praying in that regard, and thankful that our God is the answer. He has the hope. He's the solution. But anyway, I wanted to begin with Psalms 56:3. In fact, I'll read the verse. I'll start with the word prayer, and we'll dive into it. So Psalms 56, verse Mr. E, you can kind of sing along with me as I read this. It says, "What time I am afraid, I will trust in thee." Let's pray. Dear Lord, we thank you again for your goodness. We thank you for who you are. We thank you that you are trustworthy. We thank you that even in the times of chaos, even in the times of uncertainty, in the times of complete panic that seems to be taking place, that there is a rest, there are green pastures, there is a place in you where there is great comfort, there is great peace, there's great rest. And I pray that as your children that we would grasp that, we would live that, But as well, I pray that as we observe those around us that are being fueled, let's say it that way, that are being fueled into a state of anxiety and craziness. I pray that you be able to use us, that we would allow ourselves to be used as your lights, as your voice, as your ambassadors for those who are searching for any means and reaching for any means of hope and security right now. And I just pray that you use us, that you strengthen us, that as we look to your word here this morning, that you allow me to decrease so that you alone would increase, not just in this message time, but with our lives. And we thank you for that. In Jesus' name, amen. What is interesting as you, again, simple verse, short verse, well-known verse, I would imagine. And if you've never heard the verse before, or you don't know who Earl Martin is, and otherwise known as Mr. E, and have heard the little chorus from this verse, I would dare say, reading it once, we should already pretty much know it. What time I am afraid, I will trust in thee. But what is interesting is that the very first statement, the very first word in our English is what? It doesn't say if or if you know, it doesn't give us the idea or the hint or the indication that this may not ever happen to you, but if it does, here's what you need to do. The writer David, the psalmist, is seemingly kind of stating, when this happens, and every time this happens, here's what I'm going to do. And this ought to be our life. This ought to be the way that we all live, that when I am afraid, this is my go-to. When I am afraid, this is where I'm going to reach out to. And ultimately, this ought to be a response as we have opportunity to share with others this kind of hope. So several points, very quick points here this morning. I intend on to be quick. We'll see how quick I can do. My first point, you are not so big. I would guess any of us that were in Sunday school time frame between, I would guess maybe the 50s to about, probably depending on the church, but the 90s. So that's kind of a stretch there, a time frame. But if you were in a Sunday school pretty much anywhere during those time frames, and you are probably aware of the flannel graph board. And if you recall, and this has been a number of years for me, obviously some of you have a few more years added to that as well. But if I recall, I can think of a particular scene in the flannel graph of a little boy who looked like he was about 12 years old. And he looked like he was a 12-year-old from Boston. And then there was this a much larger giant of a guy who, if I recall in the flannel graph story, always wore like a green kilt. I don't know why that was. That was a Philistine thing, what the deal was, but it was like Goliath wore a green kilt. Irish Philistines or whatever that would be. I don't know what the deal was there, but anyway, a green kilt and strappy sandals, and there he stood, and this 12-year-old from Boston stood next to him, and the teacher explained the story of David and Goliath. And certainly, I can imagine, in fact, just imagine this if you could. Imagine if in the midst of this teacher giving the flannel graph story of David and Goliath, if suddenly, as we're looking at in the Gospels, like Christ appeared, imagine if David appeared. There was that 12-year-old from Boston right there in front of them. And imagine the immediate fear of those children, but then as well the curiosity as David is there. And they've just heard the story played out with this, who is it that wears it? Irish, is that right? Where are the guys that wear it? Scottish, that's right, Scotland. So the Scottish, so what was it like with the Scottish? I would dare say one of the questions that would be asked, and I bet you could guess this question, if you were a child and just heard the story of David and Goliath, and you had it kind of pictured for you, here's this little youth, a flannel graph picture was like this big, and then, I can't do it with one hand, but in comparison, here was Goliath next to him. What would be the question that a child would ask? Are you afraid? Are you afraid? Obviously, here's this on a flannel graph. This is just a little boy. And this is a giant of a guy. The guy's arms in that flannel graph picture were bigger than the entire waist of this little 12-year-old boy from Boston. And how were you afraid? Well, I think there are times that it's as a child of God, we almost want to have the response of, "No, I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid. I'm not going to be afraid of that. Certainly I'm not afraid." This is David, and remember in this scenario of 1 Samuel that's being told to us, as David is presented. In fact, let me read some verses here. 1 Samuel chapter 17, verse 8. It says, "And he stood and cried," this is speaking of Goliath, "he stood and cried unto the armies of Israel, and said unto them," I can't do this in a Scottish accent, so you have to bear with me. "Why are you come out to set your battle in array, and not I a Philistine, and ye servants of Saul? Choose you a man for you, and let him come down to me." And it's almost as you could read into what is being said from this giant of a man here, that this Philistine is pointing out, "Hey, I am ready for battle. Send somebody out here. What's the matter with you guys?" Verse 10. The Philistine said, "I defy the armies of Israel this day. Give me a man that we may fight together." What I find intriguing then is in 1 Samuel chapter 17. The story kind of goes, we're kind of seeing two scenes as they mesh together. And in the second scene, we see David being sent by his father to go bring some food to his brothers, part of the army of Israel. And it says in verse 22, verses 23, it says that David left his carriage and went into the army and came and saluted his brethren. And as he talked with them, behold, there came up the champion, the Philistine of Gath, Goliath by name, out of the armies of the Philistines, and spake according to the same words, and David heard them. Now, again, I'm going to take some liberty here and step in between the lines of Scripture here, but bear with me as I kind of try to present to you what's going on here. As we are living out in our own household of a brother in the, not the army, you'd probably be upset at me if I said army, the Marines. As he's overseas in the Marine Corps and serving, I can tell you that I don't know if my daughters, their sisters would admit this publicly or not, but I think they kind of enjoy when they get to talk to Big Brother on the phone. I'm sure they won't admit that, but it seems just as I hear their voices and their interactions, I think that they're kind of happy that they can talk to Big Brother on the phone. I can guarantee you, and I am confident he will not be ashamed to say so, Josiah lives for that moment. Josiah lives for the moment of talking to his brothers, and he will get on our little game device at home and play Josiah will get on at home and he'll play AJ there in Turkey, and they'll play the same games with the phone on so they can talk to each other. And Josiah is just in his element. He's talking about everything that you can imagine as they're doing whatever it is on the screen. Living for the moment of Big Brother in the military. I don't want to take too many liberties here, and I think David certainly was older than our Josiah is at this point, certainly. And I don't believe he was a 12-year-old from Boston either. I dare say that David is enjoying the moment with his older brothers. We don't have it recorded for us, but I just got to say, this is a family. This is how family is made. I think it's just how it works when you got younger and older. And little brother is now faced with big brothers who are not just big brothers, but they are soldiers in the army of the Lord. And so I can imagine as David runs up to his big brothers and almost, there's a battle being set. There's the stages. This is war. Here's the army of Israel. There's the Philistines over here. And there's an open field in between. And they are ready for war. And David comes running out on the battlefield. Probably, and again, this is liberty here. This is not Bible. This is my liberty here. Probably somewhat oblivious of what is even going around here because of the tunnel vision for big brothers. And what we do know is that David goes and he addresses his brothers. And I'm guessing he's giving them a big hug. And I'm guessing he's sharing with them all the news from back home. And I'm guessing he's giving them some news from Dad. And I'm guessing he's sharing with them the food and whatnot that he brought for them. And I'm guessing that they're in the midst of a conversation, and all of a sudden, while they're communicating, Goliath is making his day-to-day routine of walking out in the middle, hollering for somebody to come. And David's right in the middle of wait. What did he just say? as David, literally it says, and David heard him at the end of verse 23, verse 24, and all the men of Israel, when they saw the man, fled from him and were sore afraid. You imagine being a little brother and watching as this giant of a man comes out and then watching the armies of God. Can you imagine a little brother going out to meet up with big brothers, and suddenly big brothers and all the rest of the army of God is running for their lives the other way? Jump down to verse 33 of 1 Samuel 17, and it says, and Saul said to David, David's obviously gone to the king and said, this is not how this is going to work. Thou art not to go against this Philistine to fight with him, for thou art but a youth, and he is a man of war from his youth. Jump down to verses 45 and 46. Then said David to the Philistine. Now David is out there. He's turned down the armor of the warrior armor. And he stands out there, and in verse 45 it says, then said David to the Philistine, Thou comest to me with a sword and with a spear and with a shield. But I come to thee in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom thou hast defied. This day will the Lord deliver thee into mine hand, and I will smite thee and take thine head from thee, and I will give the carcasses of the host of the Philistines this day unto the fowls of the air and to the wild beasts of the earth. I know that there is a God in Israel. And all the Sunday school children said there was no fear in David at all. David, were you afraid? Here's David's answer. What time? Every time. In all the times that I've had in fear. And if you want to take the time, you can read through the 150 Psalms. I know not all of them were written by David, but you could read through those Psalms that he wrote. And I can dare say that there's been a lot of times in David's life when he had to choose to live this out. What time? I am afraid. You are not so big. How easy it is for us to say, I'm not going to be afraid. I'm not afraid of this. Certainly the virus, I hope that we're not afraid of this to the extent that seems to be going on around us. But there are other things that we face in our lives. There are other giants that we face in our lives. There are other circumstances that we face in our lives. How can I get through this? What time I am afraid? Not if this ever happens or if this ever applies. Should I ever get to this point? It was funny when I was talking to the person this last week who was literally having an anxiety attack. And I just happened to walk into the room and they were in the middle of I've never seen somebody with an anxiety attack. They were literally like having a hard time breathing. And I think this is the coronavirus right here. You can't even breathe. This is one of the alerts. Hello? 911. No, she's literally having a panic attack. And I said, what's going on? What's the deal? And started to explain what's going on and why, and all the details, and what she's read, and what she's heard, and watching the news, and all these other things. And she was relaying at first what was taking place the night before, and a panic attack that she was having at home. But in her conversation, she started to have another one. And she's like, well, you know what it is when you have that panic attack, and you know, and she's like, you even talk, you know. Well, actually, I don't. I'm not trying to be annoying here, but I actually don't. I don't know. I don't know what you're going through. I can dare say that I've never had a panic attack. Not like what you're having for sure. I don't know what that's like. I don't. All your what you know? No, I honestly don't. I don't know. But I do know that there have been times in my life that there has been fear because I'm not sure what's going to happen. And it's easy as a child of God to try to dismiss it as, we're John Wayne tough. We're not going to show emotion. We're not going to show fear. We're not going to show. The Word of God, by the pen of David, says, hey, when I'm afraid, I'm not admitting that I'm not too big to be afraid. I'm not saying that I'm a giant killer and I killed bears with my bare hands and I've done this and I've done that. And I was the king of Israel. Certainly, I have no fear. How was that back in the 90s? Everybody had on their back with them, no fear. And honestly, most of them that said no fear had great fears in their life. But what time I am afraid, you are not so big. Second point, But you should not be so dependent. Now, caution here, we are to be dependent upon our God. We are to be dependent upon Him. But the problem is when we have fears, and this is what's happening in our society around us. This doesn't apply to you. You know somebody that... If you are having fear, here's what happens. We look for something to be dependent upon. I don't know why toilet paper is that today. I don't understand that. I don't grasp that. Why did this other gentleman that could barely stand aright need 152 rolls of toilet paper? I don't get it. Another funny, same story. So we were walking into the store. We parked in one lane there at Schnucks, and we were just making our way, Josiah and I, making our way into the store, grocery store, and like 4 aisles down in the parking lot, there was a couple coming out of the grocery store, and I noticed them because their cart was just over-mounted with bags. So I'm assuming groceries, probably more than they needed, I would guess. But I'm not the judge. I don't know the family. I don't know how many children they're feeding, or I don't know those details. But their shopping cart was mounted over, and on the top of this mountain of groceries was this large pack of toilet paper, balanced like a teeter-totter on the top of all these bags. Well, I just kind of caught it out of the corner of my eye, and then I hear this kaboom. You know the sound of a cart when it hits a pothole in the parking lot, and it just kind of makes that kaboom. And as, like, instantaneously, like lightning and thunder, as I hear this kabunk, I hear the screech from across the parking lot, "No, not the toilet paper!" And here's this guy bent over in this puddle. He hit a bump, pothole, and boop, right into the pothole, which was full of rainwater. The guy reached down and he does one of these. And he's trying to dry off the toilet paper. I thought, you just ruined gold. You ruined the gold. How much do you want for it? Well, you know, the very reality is when we are afraid, we are going to, by design, reach for something that makes sense to us as a reason of hope, of security, of something to help us through this. It may be food. It may be toilet paper. It may be whatever it is. We've got to learn not to be so dependent on those things, but learn how to be dependent on our God. Now, the Christian life is not designed to be walked alone. It is not designed to be little islands. The Christian life is not designed for singleness. But at the same point, we've got to learn that we're not to be dependent even on each other. We're not to be dependent on things. We're not to be dependent on all the nonsense that surrounds us today. We've got to be dependent on Him. Just one word here in this first. What time What time I am afraid, and we have the same pronoun again, I. This is singular. This is not me relying on the church. It's not me relying on somebody else. This is not me putting my kind of vicariously through something or someone else. This is a personal decision on me. It's each one of us. I. What am I? What are you going to do? What time I am afraid. I need to hurry up because I'm running out of time here, but it continues on. We know the last statement. I will trust in you. You're not so big. I know we like to be John Waynes who won't shed a tear. I know that we like to be those John Waynes that will never admit that we have any fear. I know that we are somewhat like the school children, Sunday school children, that will look at David and say, "Are you afraid?" And I know that everything within us wants to say, "No." But I can also guarantee you this, that there are those around us today that are fearing for their lives. They are fearing even to the point of insanity right now. What time? You're not so big, but you should not be so dependent. Don't put your trust in something else. Put your trust in Him, which is the last point. Just trust in our God. Simple points, simple reality. Verse 4 says, "In God I will praise His word," or I will praise His word. "In God I have put my trust. I will not fear what flesh can do unto me." David is almost saying in those two verses, here's my go-to. What time I am afraid, my heart will praise and my mind will not fear. Not bad to admit, David says, that you're afraid. But here's what your go-to ought to be. Here's what your automatic response should be. I'm not going to fear. In fact, my lips are going to praise my God accordingly. We later went to Kiwani in Walmart, and we had to get some snacks for this morning that were individually wrapped just because of what's going on. And so we had a trip to Kiwani, and as we were discussing, the girls had a babysitting job last night that would be out late, and we thought, I bet by the time they get home they're gonna be hungry, just be gone from home, and so we got a frozen pizza. And if you haven't been to Walmart lately, you go to the frozen pizza, which is normally like all those coolers. I kid you not, there was like 4 frozen pizzas left. Thinking, in the month, there's gonna be a lot of pretty big people walking around because there's a lot of pizza missing. So we bought one of the 4 remaining pizzas, and the whole row that used to be packed full of pizzas, there's 4 left. Now there's 3 left when we left the store.
Anchovy?
Anchovy, yeah. Of course, it was just cheese. It was just cheese pizza. It was just plain old cheese. But it is very intriguing as we looked at the very craziness that surrounds us. And our trust is to be in our God. AJ commented, we are asking him how this is affecting him now in Turkey, and my wife may have shared this with some of you. All the nations around Turkey all have, like us, there's a lot of cases. Turkey is claiming they only have 1. I don't know how that is the case. I think, as AJ points out, I think there's a little bit of question there. But what AJ did say is, but watching what's going on in the States, he says, this is like, what did he say, some sort of horror zombie movie. He's like, you guys are going nuts over there. What's the deal? We will trust. Are we humble enough to just simply trust in our God? Back to David and Goliath, trusting God does not necessarily mean that we're losing our mind on every responsibility or, what I was trying to say, removing ourselves and our minds from every responsibility. Trusting in God does not mean that I'm not going to do anything because I'm just going to leave it all in God's hands. And that's not what trusting in God is. David didn't stand out in the field, take off the armor, walk out in the middle of that battlefield and say, come and get me, I'm ready. No, what did David have in his hands? Well, let me even say this, before he went out into the field, he went to the brook and found some stones. And I'm guessing they weren't little things like we have on our parking lot. I'm guessing they were pretty big rocks. But David went out with what God had equipped him to do. What was David most familiar with? Not the armor of battle, but the weapons of a shepherd. And David used what was available to him at the moment that he went out and declared unto Goliath, in the modern day vernacular, today you're going down because you defied my God. There are times when we have to realize what it is that we can do. And I very quickly here, just some, obviously, as a church, we are changing our schedule. And I had a long time, in fact, we spent much time discussing this, praying about this yesterday. I don't want to be a church that is going nuts. I don't want to be a church that is responding to all the chaos and nonsense that surrounds us. But I also don't want to be the church that if one of us would get it. We all have different lives. We all go to Walmart. I was just there yesterday. We all go to different places. Some of us have jobs that we go to. Whatever it might be. We all have opportunity to get sick from someplace else. I don't want to be the church that hits the news that says, so-and-so is the, whatever number we're up to, 65th case in the state of Illinois, and they go to Faith Baptist Church, and Faith Baptist Church has done nothing. Even though we've asked everybody to do something. And so in that regard, not because we want to be a part of the chaos, not because we want to overreact, not because we're out working out of fear, but because we want to do this honoring God, we get at the same point, obliging to the requests that have been passed down to us. We really want to kind of go down to reduced services, reduce time together. And so some things, some simple things that we, finding our stones, what I'm calling this. Here's our stones that we need to find. Things that we can do, not out of fear. Just, we're shepherds, we've got our sling, we're going to get those rocks, and we're going to do what God has allowed us and able us to do. Obviously, some precautions are held. Obviously, if you're sick, stay home. That doesn't just apply to church, that applies to every aspect of our life. And that's not just because of the coronavirus, pretty much it applies to every area and every other illness. If you're sick, it's not that bad to stay home. And honestly, as many are saying at this point, obviously they're saying even weeks after all the symptoms are gone, they're trying to determine, are you still contagious with this? They don't seem to really know. Honestly, I think a general good ballpark is, and I don't think you can ever put it across the board for anything, any illness, but at least a good 24 hours after the symptoms have stopped. Wait a whole 24 hours later. It's kind of the normal. If you have a temperature Saturday morning, you don't need to come to church on Sunday. If you have a temperature on Sunday morning, you don't need to go to work on Monday. It's just common sense. I'm not here to dictate how you run your health. We're not going to see it at the back door with your thermometer to check everybody's temperature when we walk in. We're throwing this on you. But the simplicity of it is, and we've all heard this, if you're sick, stay home. As far as our service schedule, then obviously we're going to reduce it to just one service a week. Here's how my intentions are for this. If you, and I don't want to say fear, but if you have concerns for your own health, if you have concerns, and I know there are certain people that are susceptible to a greater extent than others. And if you're thinking, you know what, my immune system is not as it should be, or I've got other things going on, and I just don't want to risk it. We are not a Catholic church. You do not get your righteousness from being in this building. It is okay to stay home. We will continue to do this on Facebook. If there are people that are unable to do that, we can convert it as well to YouTube so everybody can watch it live if that is necessary. But we're going to adjust, and even if I don't foresee it, but I guess I could see it in Illinois. I could definitely see this in Illinois. I can see the point if this continues to get worse that they begin to say all churches should not meet. They need to close. If that happens, we will follow their suggestion. But as long as I am healthy, I'll still be behind this pulpit every Sunday morning with that phone or some other phone right there. And if we need to all meet at our home because we've been asked to do so, at least for the Sunday morning service, I intend on being here. If I am sick, I won't be here. I might be in my living room. I can cough all I want. You won't catch it. But I will be home in my living room, so I'm not coughing all over this room. And we will have at least a short devotional live on Facebook or whatever source we have to go to. And we will continuing on. We're just for a couple of weeks, we're just going to go down to just the morning service, just for that sake. As far as our routine afterwards, after every service, which now will just only be once a week, like this afternoon, we're going to wipe down everything in the church. Again, we're not doing this out of fear. We're just picking our stones. Being prudent, exactly. And so that's why we spent all day driving from store to store and seeing people wasting toilet paper and puddles in the parking lot to find all that we will need. And every surface, this pulpit, all the pews, I was just thinking while we were singing, maybe even the hymnals need to get just a quick wipe down on the outside. The bathroom faucets, the flush handles, the doorknobs, the light switches, we're wiping it all down. We do ask that if we're not doing meals, if at all possible, stay upstairs. We don't have to wipe everything downstairs as well. Obviously, my parents do all their counting. I'm going to let them do their own wiping. But the rest of us can stay upstairs. That will just help us out. We will have less to have to clean up and sanitize. So that'll be take. If you're interested in joining the fun and the celebration of the smell of bleach and wipes, you can see my wife. I'm going to do it that way. We don't really want to just have everybody because we're afraid it's not going to help. If we get so many hands involved, it's more likely we're spreading more germs than we are actually cleaning. So, but if you're interested, see my wife. I'll just leave it that way. As far as our disinfecting, lastly, some increased levels of carefulness. Now, we aren't going to be having meals for the next several weeks. We will continue having that in the back. If you want to volunteer to do the breakfast thing there in the back, again, see my wife. We are right with that, but we want it to be individually wrapped that has not been made at home. Just for safety precautions, it just is easier that way. So like today, we have oranges and bananas that have their own peel. You have to peel it. I'm not peeling for you. You peel it, and you eat it, or individually wrap things. And there's a whole, well, I'm going to say it this way. There was a whole aisle at Walmart of individually wrapped sweet things. That certainly are options. If you're interested in being a part of that, again, see my wife. But for the next several weeks, that will be our option back there. We are doing water bottles instead of pitchers, so we're not all grabbing. and pouring. And there again, it is hard to find. This is almost as precious as toilet paper, and ironically, they sometimes go together. But if you happen to be out and about and want to get some water bottles, that would be good. I don't know that. I think little ones are good for like now. Obviously, for the meals, we might want bigger ones when we get back to that point. But again, if you're interested, those are some things that we're doing from this point forward. So even say in April, things are slowing down and they're not all hyped up and worked up about it. We wanted to go back to our normal routine once we kind of have the all clear. But I think at least for a while, we need to be prudent, continue to be prudent in that way. We would like to encourage that the food, which is technically what the insurance and actually what the state requires of us anyway, but we're a small group, we kind of do what we want. And I just said that on Facebook. But food technically is supposed to be made on site, just so that there's some control over it. We bought gloves, serving gloves, and in the ideal scenario, if food could be made on site when we go back to meals, we're going to try to change up our meal menu for a while so that it's simple. So things can be made on site, and we might be doing more grilling just so that it's fresh meat in a package. We open up, put it on the grill, we make it on site, and with proper gloves. And if somebody is sick, if somebody in my family is sick, I'm not grilling. Somebody else can grill. I might be as healthy. What do you say? Healthy as something? What do you say? Healthy as a horse? That's not what I thought it was, but that doesn't make any sense. As a what?
Healthy as an ox.
So there we go. Healthy as an ox. May not be strong as an ox, but I will be healthy. Even if I am as healthy as an ox, but one of my kids is sick, I am excusing myself from the grilling. If one of my kids is sick, my wife should be excusing herself from doing anything in the kitchen. She may be, I'm not going to say she's healthy as an ox, so that would not be appropriate. But if she is healthy, but someone in our family is not, excuse yourself from the food preparation. It just seems to make sense. And then when we do get back to, at least for a while, once we get back to the swing of things, all of the food is going to be served with gloves. So we're going to go not buffet style, but more cafeteria style. We ask you what you want, and then I give you whatever I think you need. That's going to work.
And I'll put the vegetables on the plate.
Yes! No, see, this is how, if I'm serving, you can guarantee that by the time you all have gone through the line, so it's me to go, all that will be left will be the beef.
Oh, I see.
So you may just get this much meat and this much vegetables, so that the appropriate things are left behind. Oh, look, we're out. Who knew? The vegetables are gone. What? Anyway, so food contact, kitchen access. When we do get back to meals, and we'll have to review this when it comes to it, but just so we're all on the same page, we want the kitchen to be as limited as possible. And I know right now, and it hasn't been a problem. Right now, whoever wants to go in, I'll always go downstairs and I'll wash my hands. I don't need it. We have 3 bathrooms. We have almost more bathrooms than we have people here. I can wash my hand in any other place other than the kitchen. I won't need to be in the kitchen. I'm not helping make the food. I'm staying out of the kitchen. That's because I like to serve. I like to serve, not necessarily as food, but I like to serve. I may be one of the ones serving the food with gloves on and all that, but the preparation, I think, is limited. And one of the things that we're discussing, I think all kids should stay out unless asked. It may be one of my daughters or one of the Miller daughters that one of the ladies will say, hey, can you come in here and get water bottles, bring them on the table. Then they can go in and get the water bottles out of the refrigerator and put them on the table. But we want all the kids to be out of the kitchen. And again, this is just while things are getting back to whatever the normal was that we used to have. Plasticware, we went and we bought individually packaged plasticware. Again, when we get back to that, just to make it easier. We're not just reaching in the containers full of knives and forks and spoons. Beverages, we're moving away from pouring, we're going back to cans. Offering, I was watching this morning, I don't think anybody really touches the offering plate except for the ushers. We're gonna try to keep it that way, and that'll be one of the things we wipe down, and we go in that regard. Why do we do all these things very quickly? Again, it's not because of fear. I was reminded yesterday as there was a church, is that Woodford County? Woodford County, that had a member that was just tested positive. And I know he was in his 70s, if I recall. He's older, so obviously he doesn't work. Probably doesn't work, I should say that. But what I found very interesting is all of a sudden the news article was, here's the man and here's the church he goes to, now here's what the church is going to do. And I kind of, as we were reading it, I said, where does he shop? what bars or what restaurants or why is it that the only thing that was mentioned was where he goes to church? Now, I think that's great that, here this guy is known by now of the church he's connected with. But at the same point, it's just the way the media is today. If one of us gets sick, I can guarantee you this church is going to be checked. It's going to be scrutinized. And as happened in that church, it will be closed down. And for 2 weeks, all of us will be self-quarantining ourselves at home. There is obviously a risk. Again, I think it's crazy because I don't know that year after year, and this has been said by many people, look, we have the flu that goes around and affects so many more people. And I don't understand it, but it is what it is. And we just have to be vigilant in that regard, not out of fear, but just the very realities. I want to make sure that our church has a testimony that will stand. It doesn't mean that none of you can get sick because we don't want the church in the newspaper. But when the church is investigated, then we can say, hey, we grabbed our stones and we did what we could do. And the Lord is in control. Not a single one of us may get sick or every single one of us may get sick. We don't know. Our God is in control, but we have the responsibility to get the stones and to do what it is that we can do and act reasonably. But yet, with the very reality of that, we've got to just be cautious in this regard. What time I am afraid, I will trust in thee. As David stood there with this handful of stones and brought the giant to his knees, I trust that we will have the same kind of confidence in our God, whatever giant we stand before. As the president has asked, I know we're a few minutes late here, but we would like to close with a word of prayer. I will pray, and I would ask that you do so as well if you would like. There don't have to be long prayers, but we're not stopping you from praying a long prayer. But I'll start with a word of prayer. If you'd like to jump in, just pray. Here's some things that I think would be great. Obviously, health is an obvious prayer request for all of us. Certainly, I think a great request would be that we would all have the opportunity to share hope and peace. That we would find ways to minister. Obviously, there are those who are most vulnerable at this time, who literally, as I witnessed this last week, are having anxiety attacks over this. There are lots of needs, and certainly not to be forsaken as well. All of our state and federal leaders and the WHO and CDC and everybody that literally got their hands in it, trying to figure things out and throwing things at the rest of us. Boy, do they need some wisdom and prayer as well. So let's pray. Jump in when there's a silence out close. Lord, we thank you again for your goodness. We thank you for your word. We thank you that you are a God that we can go to. You are a God that we can stand beside, and you are a God that is always there with us as well. I thank you for that. I pray that certainly directs us as a church that we would do what is reasonable, that we would do what is prudent, what is necessary, but not that we would respond in fear. I pray that you would give us all opportunities this week. As people are literally losing their minds, they're having anxiety attacks, they're extremely worked up about this. I pray that we would seek out opportunities to be that light, to be that salt in the very time as this. And I just pray that you would use us as we do. And I certainly do ask that you would certainly just keep us healthy if it's your will. I pray that we would trust on you if it's not. And I thank you for what you will do. Certainly just ask that you be with all the way from our president to our governor, to the mayors of the towns involved here in this room, to all of those that are involved on the medical aspect of it, and even the first responders. I just pray that you would give direction and wisdom, just that we would be able to put an end to this quickly, but that we'd also be able to avoid panic that seems to be escalating here in this nation. And I pray that you would use us beyond our means, use us for your cause, for your good, that you alone would be glorified. And we thank you for that opportunity. In Jesus' name, amen.